Marcus remained exactly where he was, his hand resting gently on his daughter's shoulder as the steady rhythm of rain echoed against the towering windows. The lobby buzzed with quiet conversations, rolling suitcases, and the soft music drifting through hidden speakers, yet the small space around the reception desk seemed strangely isolated. Maya looked up at her father with confusion instead of anger. She had always believed hotels were places where travelers were welcomed, and she struggled to understand why this one suddenly felt so cold. Marcus noticed the uncertainty in her eyes and bent down until they were looking at one another. "You always remember one thing," he said softly. "Never let another person's opinion decide your worth." Maya nodded, although she was still too young to fully understand the weight behind those words. Lauren glanced toward another arriving guest and greeted the newcomer with an enthusiastic smile before quickly preparing another room key. Marcus quietly watched every movement without interrupting. He noticed how warmly every guest was welcomed when they appeared to match certain expectations. He also noticed how easily assumptions seemed to replace simple questions. None of it required raised voices to become obvious. A middle-aged couple sitting near the fireplace exchanged uncertain looks after observing the interaction for several minutes. One gentleman quietly approached the reception desk and asked whether every room had truly been reserved. Lauren immediately answered that several premium accommodations remained available. The gentleman looked briefly toward Marcus before accepting his own room key and walking away without another word. Maya noticed everything. "Dad?" she whispered. "Why did he get a room?" Marcus answered with the same calm voice he had carried throughout the evening. "Because tonight we are learning something much more important than where we sleep." She squeezed his hand tightly. "Are you upset?" Marcus smiled gently. "I am disappointed, but disappointment can teach us something if we are willing to pay attention." As another employee pushed a luggage cart across the marble floor, Marcus casually looked toward the ceiling where several security cameras quietly overlooked the entire lobby. He observed the concierge greeting visitors, the bell attendants helping families with bags, and the supervisors walking between departments. Nothing escaped his attention. Every conversation, every greeting, every expression became another piece of a much larger picture. He had spent years building hotels that were supposed to make every traveler feel respected from the moment they entered the front door. Tonight, he wanted to know whether those values still existed when nobody believed the owner was watching. Lauren finally looked up again. "Sir, if you are waiting for someone, you may sit over there. Otherwise, I will need to keep the lobby clear for arriving guests." Marcus thanked her politely. "We will wait a little longer." Without complaint, he guided Maya toward a nearby seating area overlooking the entrance. The young girl climbed onto a comfortable chair and watched the rain continue outside while guests came and went through the revolving doors. After several quiet minutes, she asked another question. "Do you think people can change?" Marcus looked toward the busy reception desk before answering. "Yes, but first they have to see what they could not see before." At that moment, a hotel supervisor hurried through the lobby carrying a folder filled with reports for the following morning's executive meeting. Marcus recognized the familiar schedule immediately. The regional leadership team would soon arrive for a routine operational review that had been planned weeks earlier. He had deliberately chosen not to announce his visit because he wanted to experience the hotel exactly as every ordinary guest would. The unexpected delay at the reception desk had transformed a simple overnight stay into something far more revealing. Marcus checked his watch, then looked once more across the elegant lobby where employees continued serving guests without realizing that the quiet father sitting beside the window had already begun evaluating far more than a single conversation. The evening had become an unplanned test, and before it was over, everyone inside the Grand Meridian would discover that true leadership often begins by listening long before anyone speaks. Marcus sat quietly beside Maya while the elegant lobby continued its steady rhythm around them. The sound of rolling suitcases blended with soft piano music, creating an atmosphere that appeared welcoming to everyone except the two guests waiting patiently near the entrance. Maya rested her head against her father's shoulder for a moment before looking back toward the reception desk. "Dad?" she asked. "Are we really staying here tonight?" Marcus smiled warmly. "That depends on what we learn before this evening is over." His answer puzzled her, but she trusted him enough not to ask another question. Across the lobby, Lauren continued greeting newly arriving guests with polished professionalism. Her smile appeared genuine, her posture confident, and her movements practiced. Yet Marcus noticed a subtle pattern. Every guest received the same pleasant welcome until the first glance shaped an expectation. Those expectations quietly influenced every conversation that followed. He watched an elderly couple receive patient assistance with their luggage. A family with young children was offered complimentary cookies while they waited. A businessman carrying expensive leather luggage was immediately upgraded to a larger suite. Marcus appreciated every act of hospitality, yet he could not ignore the difference between those interactions and his own experience only minutes earlier. Maya quietly followed his gaze. "You are watching everything," she whispered. Marcus nodded. A leader learns more by observing than by speaking. She considered those words carefully before asking, "Does that mean you already know what happened?" Marcus looked at her with gentle honesty. "I know what I saw. Now I need to understand why it happened." Nearby, two bell attendants exchanged friendly conversation while organizing luggage carts. One younger employee glanced toward Marcus and Maya with concern, as though wondering whether someone should help them, but after noticing Lauren's confident manner behind the desk, he simply returned to his work. Marcus recognized the hesitation immediately. Good people sometimes remain silent because they assumed someone else had already made the correct decision. That lesson concerned him almost as much as the original encounter. Moments later, a hotel supervisor crossed the lobby carrying several printed schedules for the following morning's executive review. Marcus recognized the hotel's regional operations agenda from a distance. The meeting had been planned for weeks, and only a handful of senior leaders knew he intended to attend. His decision to arrive quietly had been deliberate. He wanted to experience the hotel exactly as any ordinary traveler would. Instead, he had discovered something far more valuable than polished presentations or impressive financial reports. He had discovered the daily culture guests experienced before anyone realized who they were. Maya gently tugged on his sleeve. "Dad, are we waiting because you want everyone to be nice?" Marcus smiled thoughtfully. "No, we are waiting because real character appears when people believe nobody important is watching." The little girl looked around the magnificent lobby once again. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Fresh flowers decorated elegant marble tables. Everything looked perfect, yet she now understood that beautiful buildings alone could never create true hospitality. Marcus quietly removed a small notebook from his coat pocket and wrote only a few brief observations. He did not record names. He wrote principles instead. Listen before judging. Observe before deciding. Lead by example. As he closed the notebook, another luxury sedan stopped beneath the covered entrance outside. Several professionally dressed executives stepped from the vehicle, carrying briefcases and garment bags, preparing for the next day's leadership conference. Marcus recognized each of them immediately, although none had yet entered the lobby. Maya noticed the arriving group through the tall glass windows. "Are those your friends?" she asked. Marcus looked toward the entrance and smiled calmly. "They are people I work with." He stood slowly, adjusted his raincoat, and took his daughter's hand once more. Across the room, Lauren finally looked up from her computer just as the executives approached the revolving doors, completely unaware that the quiet father she had overlooked all evening was only moments away from transforming an ordinary hotel lobby into the most important leadership lesson her entire career would ever witness. The revolving doors turned slowly as the group of executives stepped into the lobby, brushing rain from their coats while carrying leather portfolios and travel bags. Their conversation stopped almost instantly when they spotted Marcus standing quietly beside Maya near the seating area. The senior vice president moved first, his face shifting from routine concentration to genuine surprise. Without hesitation, he walked directly across the marble floor, extended both hands, and said with unmistakable respect, "Good evening, Mr. Bennett. We did not expect you until tomorrow morning." Every nearby employee froze. The concierge stopped arranging room keys. A bell attendant paused beside a luggage cart. Even several guests looked up from their conversations. Marcus returned the handshake with a warm smile. "Good evening, everyone. Maya and I decided to arrive a little earlier than planned." The executives greeted the little girl just as warmly. "Hello, Maya. It is wonderful to see you again." She smiled shyly and waved. Lauren stared across the reception desk in complete silence. Her eyes moved from Marcus to the executives and back again, trying to understand what she had just witnessed. The regional director turned toward the reception desk with a puzzled expression. "Mr. Bennett, have you already checked into your suite?" Marcus answered calmly. "Actually, we have not." The director frowned. "Was there a problem with your reservation?" Marcus looked toward Lauren before speaking in the same measured tone he had maintained all evening. "No reservation problem. Simply an opportunity to observe." Those words echoed through the quiet lobby. Lauren felt every eye slowly turning toward her. She opened her mouth as though to explain, but no words came. Marcus did not raise his voice. He did not accuse anyone. Instead, he walked toward the reception desk with Maya, still holding his hand. "Earlier this evening," he said gently, "my daughter and I requested a room for one night. We were told that none were available." The regional director immediately looked at the reservation monitor. His expression changed. "There are still more than 20 available rooms, including several standard accommodations." Marcus nodded slightly. A few minutes later, another guest arrived and was offered multiple options. Silence settled over the lobby once again. Maya quietly watched the adults, remembering every word her father had shared while they waited. Marcus looked at Lauren with calm sincerity rather than anger. "I would like to understand what information led to your decision." Lauren lowered her eyes. "I believe." She stopped before finishing the sentence. Marcus waited patiently. Finally, she whispered, "I made an assumption." Marcus gave a slow nod. "Thank you for your honesty." The executives expected immediate discipline, but Marcus remained composed. He turned toward the gathering employees instead. "Hospitality begins long before a room key is handed across this desk. It begins with the belief that every person deserves the same welcome before any assumptions are made." Several employees quietly lowered their heads. Others exchanged thoughtful glances, realizing the lesson extended far beyond a single conversation. The regional director apologized sincerely and immediately offered the presidential suite, but Marcus politely declined. "My daughter and I only requested an ordinary room. That request has not changed." Maya looked up at him with admiration. She understood that her father wanted fairness, not special treatment. Marcus smiled at her before turning back toward the leadership team. "Tomorrow morning, we will still hold our executive meeting," he said calmly. "However, the agenda has changed. We will begin by discussing culture before numbers, character before performance, and people before profit." No one questioned his decision. Every executive quietly agreed. As a room key was finally prepared, Marcus accepted it with a simple thank you. The polished marble lobby appeared exactly the same as it had 1 hour earlier, yet everyone standing inside understood that something far more important than a hotel check-in had just taken place. The evening had revealed a truth no financial report could ever measure, and before the next day ended, every corner of the Grand Meridian would begin changing because one quiet father had chosen patience over pride and principles over personal revenge. The following morning, the executive conference room overlooked the city through towering glass windows washed clean by the previous night's rain. Every seat around the long walnut table was occupied long before the meeting officially began. Department directors, regional executives, hotel managers, and senior supervisors quietly reviewed their reports, expecting discussions about occupancy rates, customer satisfaction scores, and quarterly performance. Instead, the room remained unusually silent as Marcus entered carrying only a slim notebook rather than the thick financial presentation everyone anticipated. Maya sat quietly near the back beside an executive assistant with a coloring book, smiling politely as several employees greeted her with genuine warmth. Marcus thanked them before taking his seat at the head of the table. He looked around the room for several moments without speaking. Finally, he said, "Before we discuss numbers, I would like to discuss last night." Every conversation immediately stopped. Lauren sat near the far end of the table beside the hotel general manager. She looked nervous but attentive, knowing the previous evening had changed far more than her own future. Marcus remained composed. "Our company has invested millions of dollars creating beautiful hotels," he began. "We have imported marble from around the world, commissioned remarkable architecture, and trained employees to deliver exceptional service. Yet none of those investments matter if a guest does not feel respected during the first 60 seconds after walking through the front door." The room remained completely still. Marcus pressed a small remote, and security footage from the previous evening appeared on the large presentation screen. The recording showed him entering with Maya, waiting patiently at the reception desk, observing other guests being welcomed, and quietly accepting every response without raising his voice. No commentary was needed. The images spoke for themselves. When the recording ended, Marcus turned off the screen instead of replaying it. "This meeting is not about embarrassment," he said calmly. "It is about responsibility." He looked first toward the general manager. Leadership is not measured only by revenue. Leadership is measured by the culture people experience when leaders are not standing beside them. The general manager slowly nodded. "I understand." Marcus then looked toward Lauren. "Yesterday you admitted that you made an assumption. That honesty matters. Now I want to understand what influenced that decision." Lauren took a slow breath before answering. "I believed I could identify which guests belonged in a luxury hotel simply by looking at them. I never questioned that belief until last night." Marcus listened without interruption. "Thank you for answering honestly." He paused before continuing. "Assumptions rarely begin with one employee. They grow inside systems when leaders fail to challenge them." Several executives exchanged thoughtful glances as those words settled over the room. Marcus opened his notebook. Instead of listing financial targets, every page contained handwritten observations from the previous evening. Greeting consistency, respect before evaluation, equal hospitality, listening without judgment. "These," he explained, "are the true standards that define our company." Maya quietly watched her father with admiration. She recognized the same calm voice he had used while comforting her in the lobby. Nothing had changed except the audience. Marcus stood and slowly walked around the conference table. No guest should ever need an impressive title, expensive luggage, or familiar face to receive courtesy. Hospitality is not something we offer after deciding someone deserves it. Hospitality is the promise we make before we know anything about the person standing in front of us. The room remained silent for several seconds before the regional vice president spoke. "What happens next?" Marcus smiled gently. "We improve." He announced a complete review of guest arrival procedures, employee coaching, leadership accountability, and customer service training across every hotel in the company. Independent evaluations would be introduced. Managers would mentor employees directly instead of relying only on written policies. Every new hire would learn that dignity, respect, and professionalism were not optional values, but the foundation of the brand itself. Marcus closed his notebook and looked around the room one final time. "Buildings create first impressions," he said quietly. "People create lasting memories. From today forward, our greatest investment will not be marble, chandeliers, or luxury suites. It will be the way every human being is welcomed before anyone knows their story." No one applauded. No one needed to. Every person in the room understood they had just witnessed the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the company far beyond a single hotel. Over the following weeks, the atmosphere inside the Grand Meridian began to change in ways that no renovation project or advertising campaign could have achieved. Every employee, from the front desk to housekeeping, from the concierge team to senior management, attended newly designed leadership and hospitality workshops. Marcus personally visited several sessions, not to lecture employees but to listen to their experiences and encourage honest conversations about respect, professionalism, and responsibility. Instead of beginning each meeting with company policies, he began with a simple question. "How do you want people to remember the way they felt when they walked through our doors?" The answers were different at first, but gradually they all pointed toward the same values. People wanted every guest to feel welcomed, valued, and safe from the very first greeting. Maya occasionally accompanied her father during these visits whenever school allowed. She quietly sat near the back of the training rooms, coloring or reading while listening to the discussions. One afternoon, an employee approached her during a short break and said, "Your father has changed the way I think about my job." Maya smiled proudly before answering. "He always says that kindness is something people remember much longer than luxury." Those words spread through the room faster than anyone expected. Lauren also attended every training session. She listened more than she spoke, taking careful notes while reflecting on the assumptions that had shaped her judgment that rainy evening. She never tried to excuse her mistake or place responsibility on someone else. Instead, she accepted difficult conversations with humility and genuine determination to become a better professional. Marcus noticed the change, but he never singled her out in front of others. He believed meaningful growth happened when people were challenged with dignity rather than humiliation. During one workshop, he invited employees to participate in an exercise. Volunteers entered the training room one at a time, dressed in different styles of clothing and carrying different types of luggage. The employees were asked to write their first impressions privately before learning each person's actual background. Every group quickly realized how easily assumptions appeared without conscious intention. The exercise produced thoughtful silence instead of embarrassment. Marcus looked around the room and said, "The goal is not to pretend we never make assumptions. The goal is to recognize them before they influence how we treat another human being." Those words became one of the most repeated lessons throughout the company. New orientation materials were rewritten. Performance reviews included hospitality values alongside operational standards. Managers spent more time coaching employees on empathy, communication, and active listening than ever before. Guest satisfaction scores slowly increased, but Marcus reminded everyone that numbers were only evidence of something deeper. When people feel respected, he often said, excellent service becomes natural. Months later, Lauren requested a private conversation with Marcus. They met inside a quiet conference room overlooking the city skyline. She thanked him for allowing her the opportunity to learn from her mistake instead of defining her forever by it. Marcus listened carefully before responding. Accountability matters, he said gently. But accountability should create better people, not simply punish imperfect ones. Lauren nodded with sincere appreciation. She understood that rebuilding trust required consistent actions rather than promises. As the seasons changed, so did the spirit inside the Grand Meridian. Employees greeted every arriving guest with the same warmth regardless of appearance, clothing, or background. Small moments of kindness became part of everyday routines instead of special exceptions. Maya noticed the difference each time she visited. She watched children receive cheerful welcomes, older travelers receive patient assistance, and business guests receive genuine smiles that looked exactly the same for everyone. One afternoon, she looked at her father and quietly said, "Now it feels the way you always wanted." Marcus smiled as sunlight filled the elegant lobby where rain and uncertainty had once defined an unforgettable evening. He knew the building itself had not changed. The marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and polished reception desk all remained exactly where they had always been. What had truly changed were the hearts and habits of the people who stood behind them, and Marcus understood that would become the greatest legacy any leader could ever hope to leave behind. Several months passed, and the changes that had begun with one difficult evening quietly spread throughout every property in the company. Employees no longer spoke about the incident itself as often as they spoke about the values it had inspired. New team members learned the story during orientation, not as a tale of embarrassment, but as a reminder that every guest carried a life they could not see. Marcus visited different hotels across the country without announcing his arrival, just as he always had. Sometimes he wore a tailored suit for scheduled meetings. Other times he arrived in jeans, a simple jacket, and comfortable walking shoes after long flights. He wanted every visit to answer one question. Would every traveler receive the same welcome regardless of appearance? More often than not, the answer became yes. Maya enjoyed accompanying her father whenever school vacations allowed. She had grown noticeably more confident since that rainy night. Instead of feeling confused by what had happened, she now understood why her father had remained calm. One afternoon, as they entered another hotel, a smiling receptionist greeted them immediately, welcomed Maya by offering a small activity booklet, and asked whether they needed anything after their journey. As they walked toward the elevator, Maya looked up and whispered, "She treated everyone exactly the same." Marcus smiled proudly. That is what respect looks like. It does not depend on who someone is. It begins before you know anything about them. During the annual leadership summit, managers from every hotel gathered to share experiences and discuss improvements. Instead of opening the conference with financial charts, Marcus invited employees from different departments to tell stories about meaningful guest experiences. A housekeeper described helping an elderly traveler locate a treasured family photograph that had accidentally slipped beneath a bed. A bell attendant spoke about comforting a nervous child who was traveling for the first time. A front desk supervisor explained how listening patiently had resolved a misunderstanding before it became a complaint. Marcus listened to every story with genuine appreciation. "These moments," he said, "will be remembered long after occupancy percentages and quarterly reports are forgotten." Lauren had continued working diligently under close mentoring and consistent evaluation. She no longer believed confidence meant assuming she already understood someone standing in front of her. Instead, she asked thoughtful questions, listened carefully, and treated every guest with the same professional courtesy. One afternoon, she welcomed an older couple wearing simple travel clothes who quietly mentioned they had been saving for years to celebrate their 50th wedding anniversary. Lauren arranged a complimentary room upgrade after learning the occasion, coordinated a handwritten congratulation card from the staff, and made certain their stay became unforgettable. When Marcus later reviewed guest feedback, he paused at their letter. They never mentioned luxury amenities. They wrote only that they had never felt so genuinely welcomed. Marcus folded the letter and smiled quietly. Real change had finally become visible without anyone needing to announce it. Later that evening, he and Maya walked through the familiar lobby of the Grand Meridian together. Fresh flowers decorated the entrance. Children laughed near the seating area. Travelers checked in with relaxed smiles, and employees greeted every arriving guest with warmth that appeared completely natural. Maya stopped near the same window where they had once watched the rain fall in silence. "Everything feels different now," she said softly. Marcus looked around the busy lobby before answering. The building did not change. The people did. Maya nodded thoughtfully. She remembered every emotion from that first evening, but those memories no longer carried sadness. They had become the beginning of something far greater. Marcus realized the greatest success of his career had never been building beautiful hotels. It had been helping create places where every person who stepped through the front doors could feel seen, respected, and welcomed without needing to prove they belonged. As another family entered the lobby carrying travel bags and hopeful smiles, an employee immediately stepped forward to greet them with genuine kindness. And Marcus knew the lesson that had started with one quiet act of patience would continue touching lives long after that unforgettable night had become part of the company's history. Nearly a year had passed since the rainy evening that quietly changed the future of the Grand Meridian, and the difference could be felt long before anyone reached the reception desk. The atmosphere had become warmer, conversations sounded more genuine, and every arriving traveler was greeted with the same sincere smile regardless of age, clothing, background, or destination. Marcus continued making unannounced visits throughout the hotel network because he believed culture could never be measured from behind an office desk. One crisp autumn afternoon, he returned to the Grand Meridian with Maya after finishing a nearby community event. This time they arrived in simple weekend clothes, carrying only light backpacks instead of business luggage. Marcus intentionally chose the side entrance used by many ordinary travelers rather than the executive entrance. He wanted another honest look at the hotel without anyone expecting him. Before they even reached the reception desk, a young bell attendant noticed Maya struggling with her backpack and immediately offered to help. His smile was warm, respectful, and completely natural. A concierge welcomed them with the same cheerful greeting offered to every guest entering the lobby. At the front desk, another receptionist looked up, smiled sincerely, and said, "Welcome. We are happy you are here. How may we assist you today?" Marcus answered with the same quiet kindness he had always shown. "My daughter and I would like a room for the evening." The receptionist immediately began preparing the reservation without hesitation, explaining the available room options with patience and professionalism. There were no assumptions, no hurried conclusions, and no difference in the way they were treated compared with anyone else standing nearby. Maya noticed every detail. She waited until they stepped aside after receiving their room key before whispering, "Dad, nobody knew who you were." Marcus smiled. That is exactly why this moment matters. As they walked through the lobby, several employees recognized Marcus and greeted him respectfully, but he simply returned their smiles and encouraged them to continue helping guests. He did not want attention focused on himself. He wanted the attention to remain where it belonged, on the travelers who had trusted the hotel with their stay. Later that afternoon, Marcus gathered a small group of employees in the lobby for an informal conversation rather than a formal meeting. He thanked them for the welcoming atmosphere they had created and reminded them that every interaction carried lasting influence. "Most people will forget the color of the walls or the design of the furniture," he said gently. They will remember how someone made them feel when they were tired, uncertain, or far from home. The employees nodded thoughtfully because they had seen those words proven true countless times during the previous months. Lauren, who had continued rebuilding trust through consistent professionalism and sincere effort, quietly listened from nearby. After the gathering ended, she approached Marcus and thanked him once again for believing that growth was possible. Marcus answered with calm honesty. People should be remembered for the choices they continue making after they recognize a mistake. She smiled with genuine gratitude, understanding that trust had been rebuilt one respectful interaction at a time. As evening sunlight poured through the towering windows, Maya stood near the same place where she had once watched rain fall with confusion in her heart. This time she saw families laughing together, elderly travelers receiving patient assistance, business guests welcomed with equal warmth, and children smiling as employees greeted them by name whenever possible. She looked at her father and quietly said, "Now this feels like the place you described before we ever came here." Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and looked around the lobby filled with ordinary moments of extraordinary kindness. He realized the greatest transformation had never appeared in a financial report or a marketing campaign. It lived inside the daily decisions of people who had chosen respect over assumption and compassion over convenience. Standing together in the heart of the hotel, father and daughter understood that true success was never measured by luxury alone. It was measured by whether every person who crossed those doors left feeling that they genuinely belonged. 1 year later, the Grand Meridian celebrated its annual Community Hospitality Day, an event Marcus had created to remind every employee that the company's greatest achievement would never be measured only by beautiful buildings or successful business reports. Instead of inviting celebrities or business partners to stand at the front entrance, he invited teachers, firefighters, nurses, military families, volunteers, and local organizations whose daily work quietly strengthened the community. Maya, now a little older and noticeably more confident, helped welcome children arriving with their parents. She remembered standing in the same lobby on that rainy evening, wondering why people had judged her father before learning who he truly was. Now she watched smiling employees greet every family with identical warmth, and she realized that one difficult experience had become the beginning of something much greater than either of them had imagined. Marcus walked slowly through the lobby without drawing attention to himself. He paused only to observe the ordinary moments that had become extraordinary because they happened naturally. A bell attendant patiently helped an elderly guest with heavy luggage. A concierge carefully explained local attractions to visitors who had never been to the city before. A receptionist knelt briefly beside a young child to answer questions about the colorful welcome package waiting in the room. Every interaction reflected the values that had gradually become part of the hotel's culture. Marcus quietly smiled because no one was performing for him anymore. They were simply doing what had become normal. During the afternoon ceremony, the regional vice president invited Marcus to say a few words. Standing before employees, guests, and community members, he looked around the familiar lobby before speaking. Every person who enters this building arrives with a story we cannot see. Some are celebrating important milestones. Others are carrying worries they never share. Our responsibility has never been to decide who deserves kindness. Our responsibility is to offer kindness first. The audience responded with warm applause, but Marcus gently raised his hand. If you remember only one thing today, remember this. Respect should never depend on appearance, profession, background, or first impressions. It should be the beginning of every conversation. Maya watched proudly as those words echoed through the same space where silence had once filled the room. After the ceremony, Lauren approached Marcus with a handwritten letter. She explained that she had started volunteering at hospitality workshops for new employees across the company, sharing her own experience as a reminder of how quickly assumptions could influence decisions. Marcus accepted the letter with gratitude and thanked her for choosing growth instead of regret. Your future will always be shaped more by what you choose next than by what happened yesterday, he said. She smiled sincerely, knowing those words had become one of the guiding principles of her life. As evening approached, families gathered outside beneath warm lights while children laughed across the courtyard. Maya slipped her hand into her father's and quietly asked, "Do you think people can really change?" Marcus looked back through the glass entrance toward the welcoming lobby where every arriving guest was greeted with the same genuine smile. He remembered the rain, the waiting, the disappointment, and the decision to respond with patience instead of anger. Then he looked at his daughter and answered with complete confidence. Yes, change begins the moment someone chooses to see another person with respect. Maya smiled as they continued walking together beneath the golden evening sky. The hotel behind them stood exactly where it always had, yet it had become something entirely different because the people inside had changed the way they welcomed the world. Marcus understood that buildings could offer comfort, luxury, and shelter, but only human kindness could make strangers feel at home. As father and daughter disappeared into the peaceful evening, the lights of the Grand Meridian continued shining brightly, not simply as a symbol of success, but as a lasting reminder that true leadership begins with humility, true hospitality begins with respect, and every life can be transformed when compassion becomes stronger than assumption. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts for spending your time with us and staying until the very last moment of this unforgettable journey. Your support means far more than you could ever imagine, and every view, every thoughtful comment, and every moment you choose to spend with our stories inspires us to continue creating meaningful experiences that celebrate kindness, courage, compassion, and hope. We believe that the most powerful stories are not simply about success or wealth. They are about the choices people make when nobody is watching, the quiet strength that overcomes difficult moments, and the belief that respect and integrity can change lives in ways that money alone never could. That is the spirit we hope to share with every story on Luxury Love Tales. Our channel is dedicated to bringing you emotional, cinematic stories filled with unforgettable characters, inspiring life lessons, heartfelt relationships, meaningful personal growth, and satisfying endings that remind us all that true leadership begins with humility, true love begins with kindness, and true success is measured by the lives we touch along the way. If today's journey stayed with you, if it made you reflect on your own experiences, or if it reminded you of the importance of treating every person with dignity and compassion, we would truly appreciate your support. Please take a moment to press the like button because every like helps these stories reach more people who may need a little encouragement today. If you enjoy heartfelt storytelling with emotional twists, uplifting messages, and unforgettable moments, we warmly invite you to subscribe to Luxury Love Tales and turn on notifications so you will never miss one of our upcoming stories. We are always working to bring you new cinematic journeys that celebrate hope, fairness, perseverance, family, friendship, and the extraordinary impact of simple acts of kindness. We also love hearing from you because every comment helps build a community where people can share their thoughts, inspire one another, and continue meaningful conversations long after each story ends. Tell us which moment touched your heart the most, which lesson you will remember, or how you believe kindness has made a difference in your own life. Your voice is an important part of this growing community, and we read your messages with genuine appreciation. Until we meet again in another unforgettable story, we hope you continue choosing compassion over judgment, understanding over assumption, patience over anger, and hope over fear. Thank you once again for listening, for believing in meaningful storytelling, and for supporting Luxury Love Tales. We are grateful to have you as part of this journey, and we look forward to sharing many more inspiring stories with you in the days ahead.